again. Today I have a special guest with me, and she's my best friend, Dr. Louise Gormley.
She's also a very good friend of mine.
Yes.
Welcome, Louise.
We
Thank you.
co-author a manuscript that we are hoping to be published soon. So without further ado, this is Dr. Louise Gormley. She's going to talk about education, which is her passion. Okay.
Okay.
So,
first of all, thank you so much, David and Saba. I'm happy to be here, and it's just so much fun to be a special guest on Talks with My Dad. I thought about what I wanted to talk about today, and I decided I wanted to talk about an article that I read back a long time ago in my first year of my master's. It was in a course that I took with Dr. Susan Tilley, and the name of the author is Elliot Eisner. So we're talking about a very, it's not a current author because he published in 1979 the first time, but there's been multiple reprints. And the name of the book is The Educational Imagination.
Ooh, I like that.
Yes. And what I like about his article, well actually it's a chapter in this book, is that he framed for me the different orientations to education. So whenever we talk about education, we have debates and we have arguments. There's some overarching ways of looking at the world and ways of looking at education that inform our arguments and inform our stances. And after I read his chapter, it became very clear to me. And he divides it into 5 different orientations. And would you like me to?
sure,
Okay.
please elaborate that, because it encapsulates the philosophy that we share about education and the passion that we share about education. And definitely, please elaborate about this.
Okay. The first one is like a focus on academic cognitive processes. So the idea is that the purpose of education is to help children to learn how to learn. So things like problem solving or say mathematics, but it isn't really so much the content that matters, but rather
Learning how to learn.
exactly and
So important. Right.
and strengthening the mind as a muscle. So if you think that the purpose of education is to strengthen your cognitive processes in children, then you're going to design a curriculum where it doesn't really matter so much what you study, but rather how you study it.
Absolutely.
And it kind of creates a habit, that muscle, like you said, to want to continuously learn for the rest of your life, to make it exciting to learn, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the second orientation that Elliot Eisner talks about is called, I'm trying to remember what it's called, academic rationalism. And that's the oldest type of orientation. And what it's talking about is whatever the greatest minds have produced. So, for example, whether that should be the greatest musicians or the greatest artists or the greatest writers, that's what children should be
Modeling
and exposed to.
Exposed to, right.
Exposed to the best and practice the best practice.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And so in that line of thinking, things like driver education or parenting or home economics are not considered as important because the idea is to expose children as widely as possible. And of course there's always some arguments because depending upon what culture you come from or what gender you are, what one culture thinks is the greatest minds may not be the same as what another culture.
Absolutely.
And then the next one is Elliot Eisner calls it personal relevance. And in that one, there's a lot of focus on what the child wants to study. So there's expectations on the teacher to find out what will interest this child and what will make them feel that education is meaningful.
Absolutely.
Worth, what their
Like the
passions
trade
are.
school, for example, and as Howard Gardner mentioned about the multiple intelligences, that we are very gifted in some areas, but
Yes.
not very good at the other areas. So it is good to personalize it.
Yes.
I think it's important to personalize, even just if I can squeeze in a little story that I just joined Toastmasters and we had a table topics and there's something about how to get kids to get more excited about learning and reading, and it starts at home. I think for one, we live by example, so parents who read most likely have children who also read at home, so that example is huge. But also, if you got them interested in something they love, take them out to museums. If they went to a museum or a cultural festival, they might go, oh wow, look at the pan flute, I'm interested in that kind of music, or the mummies, I'm going to go home and read up about that, or get a book at the library. So is that sort of in that personal...
Exactly. But for example, if you're a person who thinks the most important thing is that education of personal relevance, you may not have the same expectations for, say, a grade 1 curriculum, with David being elementary school teacher, than if you're a parent who thinks that education should be academic rationalism and the teacher should be focusing on whatever is the greatest minds of our times and times past. So if you can kind of see where there's like all these arguments and debates between parents and in the newspaper, if you go a step further, you can see sort of the higher level where these arguments are coming from, because it depends on your orientation. And then another orientation he talks about is social adaptation and social reconstruction. And what that is more about what does society need. So do we need more engineers?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Do we need more computer scientists? Do we need more doctors? And whatever society needs, that's what you should encourage children and youth to study.
I think that does happen, does it not? Even just through our,
Yes, recently Gordon Brown, for example, he said that we failed our youth because the youth, they didn't learn how to be responsible. And there is this uprising and looting and going ravaging and burning and vandalizing. This is social adaptation that Eisner is talking about, is that to see what is the interest of the society. Now we're going from individual to the societal
Personally, I think it'd be very important to start meditation classes in the classrooms. But seriously, and I think maybe one day we will be getting to that.
And certainly some teachers do.
Right,
Yes.
right. Awesome.
And under that same social adaptation, he talks about, well, one thing is what do we need to keep society functioning, but the other is how do we improve society and cure our social ills. So that is where things like women's studies or Latino studies, or when if there's certain groups who have been marginalized and oppressed, well then we can use study to help make society a more just and democratic place. And then the fifth orientation that he talks about is technological, and he talks in this, the emphasis is not so much what you study or whether it's meaningful or whether it relates to society, but rather that learning is scaffolded and you go step by step by step by step. So sort of that there's actually some planning to the teaching and learning process.
And I forget who wrote this.
Elliot Eisner.
Elliot Eisner, okay.
And he's from Chicago, and this is an old book, The Educational Imagination. But
he's a great educator, and many educators they look up to him as a great leader. Yes.
And do you think that this is being implemented in schools, or are there ways that
more and less, yes.
Well, I think what happens is that we all tend to naturally fall into one of those five orientations. I mean, we may share aspects of all five that we believe in, but most parents and most teachers might have a leaning to one or two.
The one that even just like, I guess I resonated most with was when the one about personal
relevance.
About, you know, what that child's passions are and discovering that. But I think also the huge one is that learning how to learn, because that's going to just stick with you forever if you have a passion for learning.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? And
Well, just I think that for me, this chapter by Elliot Eisner really helped me to see the bigger picture, because it made me realize sometimes when there's, you know, different groups, one group is for homework, one group is against homework, or one wants more computer technology enabled learning and the other one wants more pen and paper. It made me realize that when you're talking with people, it's always a good idea to sort of try to figure out where their leanings are, and also it helps us to reflect as teachers and as educators just what our orientations are.
Thanks, Dad.
Let's hope for a better education. Thank you,
What
Dr.
a great
Louise
friend we
Gormley.
have.
Yes, we're happy to have her.
We're so lucky, and we're sharing her and her
Thanks,
knowledge
guys.
with all y'all, because we care.
Thank you so long.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you again.